Mhm. Oh, welcome to Meaningful Mornings. Sometimes sports channels, radio programs, they review their week on a Friday or a Saturday. So we've sort of done this. Starting yesterday, we reviewed our week. I shared some happenings on Halloween about someone giving light during darkness, about someone setting up a ramp so that there's more accessibility for all to pretend to enjoy Halloween. What also happened this week was Caravaggio. How many of you practice this? How many of you have heard of this before? Okay. Typically, when people think of Caravaggio, they think about fasting. They think about fasting. And the reason for this fasting is for one to take care of themselves. If you eat too much, obviously that's not good for you. If you eat too little, that's not good for you either. But between the two, which one do? We lean heavily on eating too much. So this is a day for us to fast to take care of ourselves. And when you can take care of yourself, and I'd mentioned this in a systematic way, when you input less, you become more inward looking. When you take care of yourself, ideally, you will start to care for the self, capital S self, more. And in doing so, naturally, you care for all selves more than the same self in you, the same self in others. And we chant this. Ma vidvishavahai, which means may I understand myself first so that I can understand you. In chapter 17, verses 14 through 16, Shri Krishna is highlighting tapa, or sacrifice, that is sattvic in nature, that which helps one to have lots of faith. One of the thoughts or reflections I shared with everyone, if you remember what you have been given, it is your responsibility to serve who gave you that. In our Thursday class on Dialogue with Dharma, that's our biggest class, I had shared that. Remembering what you have been given, remembering translates into it's your responsibility to serve who gave you that. And these verses encapsulate that, to do so with one's body, with one's mouth, with one's mind. In verse 17, Shri Krishna summarizes these three verses as being a practice in nurturing sattva, quietness. What this plays out like in our day is to not have a desire. And if you don't have a desire, you won't have a demand, which means you won't be demanding. If you find you're an expecting, demanding person, that is indicative of this desire, because it's easy to say, I don't have a desire. But if the effect is happening, then the cause is happening too. In verse 18, Shri Krishna shifts to sacrifice that nurtures rajas or less faith. When one is engaged in sacrifice that is rajasic, there is desire. We use words like wanting to be recognized, respected, revered. There is demand. When it comes to a rajasic sacrifice, that demand is subtle. That demand, for many, is in the form of sympathy. Wanting sympathy. So now I'll share a really powerful story related to this and then my own personal experience. Once, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a great rishi in our culture, he was invited to a home for kirtana, for singing, for remembering divinity. And in that home, the father in that home, earlier that morning, his son had died in this home. This is all factual, what I'm sharing. Not a story, it's history. And that father knew that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was coming to his home. So instead of keeping the body in an open space, he put this body in a room. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, and he sensed that something was different about the home and this father. And he asked, "What's different? What's wrong?" And this father, who's a great seeker, said, "Nothing is wrong. Please facilitate the kirtanadi satsanga." And he did, but he was a great rishi and he could feel without words being expressed. So he asked again, "What happened?" And this father said that my son died this morning. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he shared, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he said, "Because I remembered God gave and God called back. What is there to desire and to demand?" And if we think of our lives and try to actually enact that, this is with a child, but lighter things like a job promotion or understanding another person is trivial. God gives, and I'm not saying God takes, God calls back. Who gave it to you in the first place? And if you do zoom into a child, as someone who has 2 children, to have an actual baby and for that baby to be healthy is a miracle. So now sharing this in a personal way, again, I'm zooming into our want for sympathy. On Thursday, I essentially had taught from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. continuously. Many of you are in the dialogue with Dharma class. And so sometimes, because I too have this want for sympathy, I'll share with people what I just shared with you now. That I'm so tired, I have so much to do. And when I say it, as I'm saying it, I'm embarrassed. And afterwards, I feel humiliated that here I am thinking I'm sacrificing, but really, I'm just practicing aggressiveness. So think lots about, we say we don't have a desire, we say we don't have a demand. Maybe not in a gross way, but I'm going to say it is in a subtle way in the form of sympathy. If someone gives you sympathy, fine, but for you to want it, certainly then, I'm remembering what I'm sacrificing, which means I'm not sacrificing. We continue into verse 19. We chanted the first word, now we'll chant the full verse. Mudha grahenatmano yat pidaya kriyate tapaha parasyotsadanartham va tattamasam udahritam. Joy. In the first quarter, Shri Krishna is sharing, Atmanaha, the personality type, that is, Muda Graha, that is operating from a perspective or with the intention of tamas, that is foolishness. A foolish person is someone who has little faith, which means they are little, as in little-hearted. And so their vision of life in terms of thoughts and words and actions are the same. In this verse, we're continuing to focus on sacrifice, but sacrifice that is with little faith. So such people are little, and their vision is little. What do they do then? Pidaya means they torture. They cause harm. Kriyate tapaha. Their sacrifice is engaging in causing torture and harm. Putting a framework out for you to think about in terms of this quarter. Those who are quiet, they help oneself and they help others. Those who are aggressive harm oneself. And now in this quarter, those who are lazy or of little faith, they harm oneself and others. Third quarter, more specifically, parasya utsat anartha. Their purpose is to cause this feeling in others. And I'm zooming into the word anartha. If you go back to verse 17, Shri Krishna used the word priti artha. And if he didn't use that, I explained that to you. Remember priti artham or priti artham. What you're doing is to please divinity. Then in verse 18, the artha is puja artha, where one's purpose or value comes from people offering worship to themselves. So priti artha, lower than that, puja artha, but here one is engaged in anartha. There is a destruction of oneself and of others. Quarter 2 and 3 are similar in thought. Tat, all that has been shared in this verse, udahritam, this is described, what is being taught is tamasam. It is of the nature of darkness or laziness or little faith. Summarizing this section. In this chapter, let me go back. In chapter 16, Shri Krishna invested 3 verses into values and 1 verse into vices. Now in this chapter, Shri Krishna has invested 4 verses into sacrifice with lots of faith and only 2 verses in terms of sacrifice with little or less or little faith. And what he's showing to us is divinity is in the details. These details are what the focus of Bhagavad Gita is, for one to practice not that which is little or less, but that which is lots. Now Shri Krishna has completed classification, given us frameworks for Shraddha, Ahara, Yajna, and Tapa. Now what's going to come next? If one is dedicated and one is sacrificed, one will feel happy. And those who are happy are those who are helpful which is why the next series of classification or verses is on dana. We're on the 20th verse. A famous verse, famous framework. Datavyam iti yad danam diyate nupakarine deshe kale cha patre cha taddanam satvikam smritam. Joy. Datavyam is a word like kartavyam. What does kartavyam mean? It is your duty or responsibility. Now, karta, which means to do something, is being changed to data, which means giving is your responsibility. With feeling this giving, iti yat danam, this is how one should practice this. So coming back slightly, I had mentioned when we started this chapter, tapa means to conserve. Yajna means to channel, and dana means to create. When we think of creativity, it typically is about us being creative. But here, creative means helping others to rise. And different words I used. Tapa means to redirect. Yajna means to rejuvenate. And dana means to release. Diyate, when one feels this is their responsibility, they should give diyate to whom? Anupakarine. If you search this in terms of a Sanskrit dictionary, it means useless. Give to one who is useless. So I'm super useless then, because I keep asking you to give to me. But here's where a philosophy and a guide is needed. You have to put a hyphen in there. Use less. You are to give where there is no use to you. You have to give to a presence, a purpose, a person whom you are not doing this for your use. Too awesome. Now, lots and lots and lots to share here. Further refinements in our giving. Desha means space. How this is to be practiced, you should use whatever space you need, and whatever you don't need, give this. Here, Desha represents all that we have. If you need it, use it. If you don't need it, give it. Kala means time. This is another refinement. You've all heard of the saying, to be early is to be on time. And what's the next sequence? To be on time is to be late. When you give because you're asked to give, that's you being late. I always laugh to myself is that when we have our fundraising efforts, they always get completed in the last week, when really they should be completed in the first week or the first month. But even our dana maybe is not sattvic. In terms of dakshina and dana, reminders for a seeker is an insult. And patra means a vessel. Here, patra more specifically is matter. What is important, and this would be my final thought. In Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a system that's given in terms of what matters or what's important. And Rishi Shukracharya shares 60% of your resources should go towards your own pleasure, possession, position. 20% swajana. That means for your own people, specifically family. So individuality and then family, and 20% dharmaya. Should be for the community, society, humanity to further dharma. This is an intense verse, and I'm not done yet, so we'll continue tomorrow. From inspiration to application. Your application yesterday was to memorize verse 20. How many of you did this? Okay. You're too scared of it. That's what happened. I'm reminding everyone, in this coming week, we are going to complete chapter 17, the highest vocation, 1100 days of meaningful mornings, all aligned with Deepavali. If you're feeling grateful, and these are some reasons to feel grateful, then remember, don't just memorize this verse, live it. And here's your application for today. I'm going to make this even more intense. I want you to go to last year's tax return, your personal tax return. And I want you to analyze from your gross income to your charitable contributions, what percentage was it? What percent of your gross income did you engage in datavyam, or giving is your responsibility? And I've already given you a reference. Srimad Bhagavatam shares 20%. So if you don't join tomorrow, I'll know why. You were too heartbroken. You thought your dana was sattvic, but Shanti, 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 be joy.